Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at HIMS and HERS health. It is time for another update, and today we will be discussing the reversal that has formed so far to the upside from the current low, which by the way we have been prepared for. We have been tracking this structure to the downside even before forming this wave B top. We were looking for another low within this area of support, and we have now a complete structure and we are looking for the reversal to the upside to new all-time highs. But before we discuss those, I would like to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new. And here we are tracking an overall larger leading diagonal to be forming, where we expect to build a 5-wave structure, but we only expect to build it in patterns, in corrective ABC patterns basically. Where we have an ABC pattern in a wave 1, we have an ABC pattern in a wave 2, and we are looking here at an ABC pattern in a wave 3. Now, so far, the structure that we are tracking in this wave 3 is headed towards the end of this pattern. We are tracking an ABC pattern where in the wave C, we really only need to form one additional new all-time high, and we have enough waves to consider it complete. But I have to say, there are ways we could possibly extend where I don't necessarily absolutely need to consider this the A wave top. I could consider this the A wave top, here the wave B bottom, but then this would be a quite bullish scenario where it would have very bullish implications, where this would be instead a 1-2 setup, and I would be looking here for a third wave to the upside. In that case, we would expect quite severe extensions in this wave 3, where maybe this isn't necessarily even the wave A itself of the larger wave 3. It would be an ABC structure in a larger wave A, then we get the smaller wave B, and then the wave C to the upside to complete the overall wave 3. But again, this is a very bullish scenario, and we will track internally such a possibility of further and further extensions. But for now, we are going to focus on the more conservative approach, because while it isn't necessarily watching too closely for those bullish implications, it watches a more conservative and realistic expectation we could have here for this chart, and we will continue to focus on this interpretation and not other more bearish scenarios here, as long as we hold the internal levels of support that go all the way down to the $30 level. Meaning that as long as we don't break here the 78.6% retracement, we won't really consider any bearish interpretation more likely. In other scenarios, we could have here still a wave 1, but the wave 2 could retrace even deeper. That could be a scenario, and then of course we can continue in our uptrend, but it would suppose that we continue in this overall correction. But again, not a preferred scenario for me, not as long as we hold here the area of support, and we have already formed one of those high regarded areas by building an initial 5-wave structure to the upside. This is one of those areas that I look with higher regard than some other areas when we build a 3-wave structure to the upside, and we still look for such an area of support. But I always mention that it isn't necessarily a high probability trade setup. Well, in this case, we have one of those setups. We have an A wave up in a leading diagonal. We have here our B wave correction, which is now full. We don't need any additional continuation lower to have a full count within this scenario, and we are looking for the wave C to the upside. And by the way, we can even look here for an ideal target for the wave C, assuming that we have bottomed in the wave B, and that would be at around the $97 level at the 100% extension of the wave A. But as I always say, we don't need to get there and we don't need to stop there. We will need to be tracking here this internal structure to have a more clear view of the expectations that we should have for this overall pattern. Now, with that said, we have been tracking this extension lower. Now we are talking about this correction which has occurred over the last few months, and we have been looking for an extension lower ever since we have actually formed this initial wave A down. We have been looking for the correction in a wave B, but we had this resistance area in red, and I was already ready for a top ever since we started this initial movement down. We managed to push higher and reset the wave B top, but we didn't manage to break here the area of resistance, and we followed through to the downside in a wave C quite perfectly. Now in this wave C, we have had quite a serious extension in this 5th wave to the downside, where we were tracking an impulse, and honestly, I am still interpreting this structure to the downside as an impulse still, and that is perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable, but we have already started the most significant reversal ever since we started this entire downtrend, which suggests to me that this is likely the reversal happening. This is likely the wave C, the initial wave 1 of this overall wave C. Now remember, a wave C is always a 5-wave structure. We are tracking a wave C to the upside and we are looking to build a larger 5-wave move to build the overall pattern, but the wave C can be a diagonal itself. It doesn't need to be an impulse, meaning that the internals, so the wave 1 of the wave C, could work out as an ABC structure, and we will need to keep that in mind. But if we manage to form here an initial 5-wave move to the upside in the wave 1, we will have a high probability of looking for the correction in another 1-2 setup, yeah, a double probability increase. This would be the next confirmation level, and then we would be looking for a third wave where in this case it would actually be an impulse. Now, from a large time frame perspective, we are still quite deep into the area of support. We are below the 50% retracement. Some of you may have even considered positions above these levels as we were heading down, and it wouldn't have even been a mistake, but we were expecting quite possibly a deeper retracement than the previous wave A low, especially since we were tracking a zigzag correction. Now, you may be thinking, well, couldn't we be looking for further extensions in a supposed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And I would say, not really. It is highly unlikely for me that this is a third wave that has unfolded in this area, because we have only managed to get here to the 123.6% extension. This would normally be perfectly fine to be a third wave, but I mean, yeah, it is perfectly fine to be a third wave because I am tracking this movement to the downside as an impulse, but it isn't necessarily a high probability for me because it hasn't managed to get to those ideal levels. And that is actually quite a critical point for forming a reliable wave 3. Now, with that said, in the previous video, we were looking for a scenario that could allow further extensions lower here in white, where I was considering a possible ABC pattern just to have some relevant areas of resistance to be tracking. And it was rightfully so, because clearly we have pushed here into those levels. The 38.2% retracement caused this reaction for this internal wave 3 to the upside. Then the 50% retracement caused this more significant reaction and pushed us into the area of support, which, by the way, now needs to be adjusted. As I was making the previous video, we were still pushing higher into this wave 1, but we have formed here, after this initial 5-wave move to the upside, we have formed here a 3-wave correction to the downside, and we are looking for the third wave to be unfolding in this area. Now again, this could work out into an ABC structure in the end, and we are technically still in this area of resistance, but I want to mention, this isn't a highly consequential area of resistance. In this pattern to the downside, if we were to be tracking a 5-wave move to the downside in a wave C, I would have expected normally a more, let's say, restrained correction in a wave 4, where in this wave 2 we had quite a quick movement, quite a quick correction, if we are to track this as a wave 2, and I would have expected maybe a similar size in the wave 4, but clearly we are already heading into new highs in this territory, and technically I could consider this still an ABC structure, but it is not a high probability interpretation for me. I find it much more likely that we actually break this white scenario completely, which is why I honestly don't even want to focus on it right now, especially since we have formed here a new local high, and I would expect this movement still to extend higher, and we will keep it in mind if it ends up failing. But for now, I want to track a more generic area of resistance for this overall pattern, where technically, yeah, sure, we could be looking here for another 1-2 setup, Again, not the wave 3 itself, but it could form another 1-2 setup, and in that case, we could be watching out here for resistance at the levels between the $42.9 all the way up to the $56.4 level. But in this case, we wouldn't have even gotten yet to the area of resistance, and we may do so in this supposed extension higher. Yeah, even if we are to build just an ABC structure, we could get into this area of resistance. And if we are to look for some ideal targets, I would be looking here for the third wave at the 138.2% extension of the wave 1, which is the $46.7 level. And if I were to be looking for a wave C, it would be sufficient. Yeah, it would be the ideal target at the $43.4 level. But with those, as I always say, we don't need to get there and we don't need to stop there. We don't have necessarily as hard of some rules for the wave C, but we must see a 5-wave structure, which at this point is not yet complete, most likely. Yeah, this structure is pretty clearly, at best, a 3-wave move to the upside so far. Now, what other resistance could we watch out for? Well, I would right now be eyeing some resistance levels in terms of structural resistance, and here we could be looking, maybe on the 4-hour time frame we see them better, but yeah, this area between the $46.3 all the way down to this peak, the $46 level. Yeah, so between these levels, the 46 something level should prove a bit more difficult to break, but nothing too significant necessarily, and it is, however, very much in line with the ideal target for the wave 3 overall, the $46.7 level. Now we can see that within this retracement in wave 2 we have pushed nicely into the area of support, and we have started a nice reaction to the upside. Internally, unfortunately, we don't have too much data to go through. We may be able to account here for a couple of 1-2 setups, yeah, maybe even more in this area, and then a third wave unfolding right now. But I won't go too much into detail for those, and I don't really have an internal area of support. What I want you to focus on for now is the area of resistance, the overall pattern, to build a more reliable 5-wave move to the upside in this area. And honestly, I suppose we could look here for some area of support, but as it is a moving target, it would need to be adjusted along with the price, the top that is forming in this area. And right now, the best I can do for a possible 1-2 setup is probably here at the levels between the $39.2 all the way down to the $38.3 level. And for now, these are the levels. This is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.